I'm gonna read a quote. I'm gonna read a quote from the article, and
All right.
I want you to respond to this. So, it is time to halt the risk management disciplines encroachment into the business continuity space. It is time to halt risk management disciplines encroachment into the business continuity space. What are you talking about there?
You're going to put me on the spot
I'm
here.
putting you on the spot.
So this is anybody who's been in business continuity for any length of time knows risk management is becoming much more of a focus within business continuity, and it's almost kind of a driver of business continuity. And I think it's kind of dangerous for business continuity in general, as well as for practitioners. I think our focus on managing and mitigating risks takes away from what our primary focus is, which is being able to respond and recover from a disruption, regardless of the probability or the impact of that threat or that risk. And I see two fundamental problems. First and foremost, the likely risks are the ones that you're probably most likely going to be prepared for and that are probably going to be most likely mitigated against. It's the least likely risks that are ones that are the most disruptive. Just to give you a couple of examples, snowstorms in Buffalo. We all saw that as it's pretty common.
I was going to say
obviously it's a major risk, but we saw just recently in just this last winter record snowfall amounts in Buffalo that practically brought the city to its knees. On the opposite end of the spectrum, it's those risks that are very least likely that cause the greatest impact. Most recently, flooding in Phoenix, something that most people don't even have on their radar as a risk, caused major events and major problems within that city. Ice storms in Atlanta, again, something that's very infrequent, but again, brought the whole city to its standstill, despite the fact that it was something that we would consider very low risk and not something that we would spend a lot of time mitigating against. But it simply proves that we need to spend a lot less time in that risk evaluation and risk assessment area and more time just preparing for impacts and disruptions regardless of the likelihood of that threat.
Well, and there's something in the article to the extent, I think I'm paraphrasing, that once the decision is made to accept the risk, now we've got to prepare for the disaster. I mean, we can't stop every bad thing from happening. We can't identify and mitigate every threat. There are any number of risks, any number of threats that we simply have to accept, many of which we don't know about. And we could talk about black swans, and we can talk about cascading events, and we can talk about these problems, I think, that are endemic inside of risk management. But at the end of the day, when executive leadership says, yes, we're going to accept that risk, now it's the business continuity planner's responsibility to get the organization ready for what happens if that risk hits, if that threat comes true.
Exactly. I think we sometimes fall into the trap of thinking that our responsibility is to mitigate risks and remediate risks. So when an executive decides that they're going to accept a risk, we look at it as our duty to convince them otherwise. And again, that goes back to that executive support. And to your point, really our focus should be, if they're accepting the risk, we need to be preparing for the realization of that risk or that threat. But then again, that goes back to my whole approach, which is we need to focus less on individual threats and risks and more on the impact from those threats and those risks. What if you lose people? What if you lose workspace? What if you lose your technology, your third-party suppliers? It doesn't matter why they're gone. You can prepare all day long for a pandemic, but if it's a transit strike in New York that prevents people from getting to the workplace, it doesn't matter what you have as far as awareness posters around washing your hands or what you've done on the pandemic side of the house. You still have to execute the same strategies.